Hey guys, Joel here for Dogtail Brewing. Welcome to the Dogtail Brewing channel. For today's video, I'm going to be going over everything you need to start making that first beer. If you like these videos, click the like button, and if you want to see more, then click the subscribe button down there at the bottom at the end. So for the first video, to make things easier, I'm going to break it up into three categories. First thing is things you might already have, replenishables, and one-time purchases. Okay, so for the first thing, we are going to go over things you might already have. These are things around your house that you probably already have. The first thing is a pot. You're going to need a pot. This is a brewer's best pot, I think. It's about 7 gallons. The bigger the pot, the better. You don't necessarily have to purchase something like this. This is one I had around the house. It's about 4 gallons. You can get away with a 3 to 4 gallon pot. You just have to be really careful watching for it to boil over. I'll explain that more in the next video. The next thing you need, ice. Probably need a couple bags of ice. You're going to use that near the end of the boil to cool things down. You need a timer. Just my watch is all I use. You need a long spoon, so something fairly long that you can get in there without getting your hand in there. You want to make sure it's pretty long. A wooden spoon is fine. If you're using a smaller pot, it doesn't have to be as long. A measuring cup. So you preferably want a microwavable measuring cup because you're going to use that later on. This is my salt carrier. So salt is something you're going to use when you put the ice. Put the salt there. It helps the ice last a little bit longer. And then a black garbage bag. So most people have these around the house. You're going to be using that at the end to cover up your fermentation bucket. So next up on the list are replenishables. Replenishables are things that you are going to use up the more you brew. Some things you use up pretty quickly, other things it'll take a little bit longer, but eventually you'll have to buy them again. So let's get right to it. The first thing is a dry malt extract. Since we're brewing our first beer, dry malt extract is very simple and easy to use. You can buy a liquid malt extract. It's a little messier. You can go full grain, but if this is your first beer, stick with dry malt extract. This right here is just a Pilsen. It's very light. Next up, hops. Got a couple things of hops here. Probably 2 ounces is a good start. 1 to 2 ounces of hops. This is Galaxy and Simcoe. I like a hoppier beer, so I'm going to use a lot more hops than that. But if this is your first time, 2 ounces of hops should be good for starters. A yeast. This is Kvike yeast. It's the yeast I use most of the time. There's different types. It's a Kvike Voss. I live in Florida. It's very hot. I like to brew things fast. The Kvike yeast brews at a higher temperature and it brews extremely fast. Usually my fermentation is done within 3 days. Sugar. Most people have sugar around. A big batch of sugar helps. It's going to help increase your specific gravity, so give you a little bit higher alcohol content. And it's very inexpensive. So you want to have some sugar around, you're going to use that. Whirl flock tabs. Whirl flock tabs are something you're going to put in at the end of the boil. You're going to throw one in there. It's going to help you clear your beer later on down the line. Star sand. Star sand is something you're going to use to sanitize everything. So anything that touches your wort after the boil, you're going to want to have star sand. You're going to put it in a bucket. You're going to dip things in there. You probably want to get, if you're going to make quite a bit of beer, get a little bit bigger one of these. This is kind of small. You're going to use some gelatin. So this is some gelatin findings. Gelatin findings you're going to use to clear your beer. Usually at the very end when I'm done with fermentation, I'll do something called cold crashing, stick the gelatin findings in. Within about 48 hours, it's a crystal clear. Conditioning tabs. Conditioning tabs are something you're going to put in at the end when you're bottling your beer. If it's your first time doing this, first time you're making a beer, you're going to stick about 5 of these in the bottle, put a cap on it, and that's going to carbonate the beer for you. It takes a couple weeks, but it gives you a nice head on the beer, and it carbonates it in the bottle. And then of course, bottle caps. These are, I think, I got pack of 50 for like $5. So you're gonna use those. So that's what we're gonna use for replenishables. The next thing we're gonna talk about are one-time purchases. So let's get onto that. Okay, so next on our list is one-time purchases. These are things that you're probably going to buy once and keep using over and over. Let's get started with the buckets first. A 5-gallon bucket, pick it up at this guy from Ace Hardware, Home Depot. You get a 5-gallon bucket, and you're going to use this as your sanitizing bucket. So you're going to use your Star San in here, dip all your stuff in there to make sure it's sanitized. So you can get one of these. You can also use this for fermenting also. It depends on how big your batch is going to be. If you're going to be making 5-gallon batches, then you're at least going to need this. You might even need a larger one, maybe like a 7-gallon one. You can get this at like online on Amazon or your local brew shop or something. Me personally, I like to make 2-gallon batches. So I have a 2-gallon bucket here. I usually make 2 gallons, 1.5 to 2 gallons. That way it's not as expensive. I can make different types of brews. If it doesn't taste good, it's not like I'm out a lot of money. So I like those. What my suggestion would be, when you're getting a bucket, just hop on to like Midwest Brewing or one of the brewer places online. Get yourself a bucket. It already has the grommet in the top, because that's where your airlock is going to go, and has a spigot on it also. So you can see the spigot. My suggestion was just go on there, buy one. They're not very expensive, $15, $20. You can get one with the grommet up top, the spigot. It'll make your life so much easier. You won't need to be sucking stuff out. You'll just open the little spigot and drain out your beer, keeps air out of it. It's the way to go, I promise you. So you need one of these at least. You might need 2. If you're going to be doing a 5-gallon batch, or if you're going to do smaller ones, I'd say one of these. Okay, next thing up is, let's go for airlocks. So you need an airlock. Airlock is just going to go on the top, that little grommet right here. You're going to stick it right in, just like that. And that's going to be there while you're fermenting to keep everything sterilized. Okay, there's different types of airlocks. There's this type, which is old school. This is kind of probably more the newer one. I don't use these, I use these. I used to make wine, I use those, so I just like these. I like to watch the bubbles come out. You're gonna need something called a hydrometer. A hydrometer, it's one of these bad boys right here. Get this on Amazon, $9, $10. The hydrometer, you're gonna be taking a specific gravity reading at the beginning, and at the end, it's gonna tell you what your alcohol level is, what your ABV level is. A thermometer. I have a floating thermometer I've had for years. You can just use a regular thermometer if you have one already, an over thermometer or anything like that. Something you're going to be sticking in your wort to judge the temperature. So I just have this one. It was $9 on Amazon. I've had it forever, so that's what I use. You're going to, I would suggest getting one of these. This is just a little graduated cylinder. When you're doing your reading with your hydrometer, you're going to fill this up. Drop your hydrometer in, spin it, and that's an easiest way without contaminating your wort to kind of figure out what your specific gravity is at the beginning and at the end. Spigots, if you do just buy a plain old bucket from Ace Hardware or something like that, I would suggest buying a spigot. Get these on Amazon, $2. And you'll put that spigot, you'll drill a hole, put it in the bottom. Probably want to have a little bit of plumber's tape. That'll make sure it's sealed up really nice. When you put that on there, you're able to drain out the beer and leave all the gunk at the bottom. So it just makes things easier. Some little muslin bags. These ones you can buy, same thing, $5. You get a whole bunch of them. They come in a big long string. You'll probably be putting hops in here, tying it off, dropping your hops in there. It's one way to keep things a little bit cleaner and neater. So it's not as much cleanup. You don't have to have those. Lots of times I just throw the hops directly in, and then with the spigot, I'm able to drain off the wort without getting all the gunk in there. You're gonna need some beer bottles if you're bottling, and like I said, if you're new to this, you're probably gonna be bottling. That's the only way to really carbonate your beer if you don't have a keg. So I get these little 12 ouncers. You get them online, they're about $1 a piece. And basically you just reuse them, just sanitize them with your starter sand when you're done. You already have the caps, so you're gonna need a capping tool. 16 bucks on Amazon. Little capping tool, the cap's just gonna stick to it. It's gonna go on top. You're gonna press, gonna cap your thing, so you press hard. Last thing is a little bit of tubing, a little bit of food grade tubing. This food grade tubing is great when you put it on your spigot. It's right on there, and then you can drain it right into your bottle, and that's one way to keep oxygen from getting in there when you're bottling your beer. So that's kind of your one-time purchases. Now the next thing I'll go over is, if you're not going to be bottling, you can do a keg, and I'll show you my suggestion for the keg on the next segment here. Okay, so the last thing probably on the wish list would be, when you first start brewing beer, usually you'll bottle it, you'll throw some conditioning tabs in it, and that's how you will carbonate your beer. After doing 2 or 3 batches, I realized I didn't want to wait 2 weeks for it, and the carbonation was good, but it wasn't fantastic. So I went out and purchased a miniature corny keg, CO2 tank, regulator. So this is kind of on the wish list. This is stuff that I would recommend if you're going to stick to doing this. I've tried out a couple times, put it in the bottles, use your conditioning tabs, and then if you think you really like doing this, you want to try something out, go ahead and get, this is a 5-pound CO2 tank. You can get that usually at a home brewer place or any place that does carbonation. You get the tank, you just exchange it in. So it's a little expensive at first. I think it's probably about 120 bucks to get one full, but then when you change it in, it's usually like $35. But if you're using a mini keg like this, then it's going to take you forever to use up all this CO2. This is just a corny keg, but it's a mini one. I think it's about 1.75 gallons. I like it because I do 2-gallon batches. I can carbonate it instantly within 2 hours. By the next day, it's perfectly carbonated. So you get a CO2 tank, you need to get a regulator for it also. And then you'll need to get a tap. So you can get a tap, and I just handmade this little wooden one on top there, but you can get a tap. That's not very expensive at all. So, I mean, probably total you're looking at about 200 bucks for this stuff here. So that's something, if this is something I'm gonna stick with, I'd highly recommend getting. Once you start to put things in a keg, if you want to bottle it afterwards, which I do, I like to put it in the keg, carbonate it. I still like to bottle it because I hand it out to my friends or I take it to the party, things like that. It's much better than carrying a keg in there. I just like the convenience of, hey, try this new beer I tried, try this out, and give them a couple bottles of it. So that's my recommendation for if you have a little extra money to spend and you're going to stick with it. So just a few final thoughts. If you are just starting out, this is an exciting time. You're going to have a great time doing it, I promise. The investment is fairly minimal at the outset, unless you go ahead and purchase a keg. What I would do is just make a couple batches first, maybe make smaller batches, maybe like a 2-gallon batch. That way you're not putting a lot of expense into it. You don't have to buy as much replenishables, and see how it goes. See if it's something you really like. If it is, then I'd recommend going ahead and getting the keg. I like the mini keg. I don't want to make 5 gallons of beer. I'm not going to drink 5 gallons of beer ever. Smaller batches are just fine with me. Usually I get about 15 bottles of beer out of it. I drink some, hand some out to my friends. It's more about just making the beer and trying things out that I really like. I like drinking beer, but I really like the process of doing it all. So if you guys like this video, then click the like button, and if you really like it, then click that subscribe button for me. I really appreciate it. The next video I'll be making will be showing you how I actually do the brewing process, my whole steps for doing it, and I'll start from beginning to end and show you everything. So that'll be the next video up. So I hope to see you guys again.